How to Ensure a Seamless Hybrid SharePoint Environment by Craig Jahnke and Jay Leask.
Congratulations, Craig. You passed test number 1. I spoke while muted and you kept going. Thank you.
That's what I thought.
Lord. Real quick, want to thank our sponsors. Craig and I were part of the team that ran M365 Chicago back in November. And yes, the videos are coming, I promise. But the sponsors make it entirely possible. So on behalf of Galen and Joel and Ryan and the team, thank you so much to the people who make this possible, other than the people who run it. My name is Jay Leask. I'm Principal Solution Engineer at AvePoint Public Sector. My job is as lead strategist on the pre-sales team to make sure that all of our, especially on the Fed and DoD side, customers understand what do they have, what are they trying to accomplish, and where necessary, how can we help. Across the bottom, you can see I've got a couple of podcasts that I'm a part of, and we're going to post this on Twitter so you can, or we'll share the link to this on Twitter so you can go to my handle and download the deck, and on there are links to all of these items. Craig, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Craig Jahnke, Customer Engineer, Microsoft. I've been there about 2 years. Before that, I did a bunch of consulting, and before that, I did various other jobs in the technology world. So Customer Engineer, some of you may be more familiar with the Premier Field Engineer, but we reorged and had to rename our titles so that they would make sense with other organizations and our salespeople could be happy and could easily compare them. I started out SharePoint, 2007, and then started in consulting, doing a bunch of migrations up through the different platforms. And once Office 365 came out, I've been playing in that space. So SharePoint, SharePoint Online, Microsoft Teams, and more lately Power Platform is the stuff that I've been doing.
Yeah, we can both have a drink to trying to keep the salespeople happy, right?
Yes, that's everything is about keeping our salespeople happy. And as Jay say, we do a podcast called This Week in Teams. Try to do it every week, and then you're on a Power Platform user group out of Chicago, which we'll have a link to.
Yep. All right. So this presentation is called "What is SharePoint?" Well, this section is called "What is SharePoint Hybrid?" As we go through, please feel free to post questions in the chat if you have any. We'll do our best to monitor the chat, and if you stump us, I promise we'll do research and get you an answer. So I'm going to let Craig actually go into what is SharePoint Hybrid. But before we do, I want to say what SharePoint Hybrid isn't. Hybrid does not mean that you have SharePoint on premises and you have SharePoint online, end of story. Congratulations, you have 2 systems for collaboration, and hopefully there are some guiding principles as to why you use each of them. But that is simply having 2 systems. If you are SharePoint Hybrid, that means you are using them purposefully and connecting them purposefully to integrate various parts of the services together. That is, when we talk about SharePoint Hybrid, what we're referring to.
Sweet, thanks for that. Yeah, so we're talking about SharePoint Hybrid right now, which is a hybrid environment, right? So that means they work together. Basically, we establish trusted communications between the two parts of the organization. So that's SharePoint servers, so you might know them as SharePoint 2013, SharePoint 2016, SharePoint 2019, or on-premises is a lot of ways that that's referred to. And I'm going to put that in air quotes because a lot of customers aren't running those on-premises anymore, but we're going to assume you are for this thing. You could be running them virtualized, right? So they might be on a virtualized server that's on-premises, or they might be in Azure or some other hosting service, but for our purposes, we're going to work on premises means on premises, and then that's going to connect into SharePoint Online, which is part of the Microsoft 365 cloud solution, right? So what we want to do is be able to configure those 2 separate environments to have some integrated functionality between services, like so to be able to search, be able to follow, be able to hook onto sites. We're going to get a little bit more into what that might mean. So basically we're taking 2 different systems, hooking together so they trust each other, and we can pass information back and forth to each other. And then we can move to the next slide, Jay.
Hey, Craig, while I'm doing that, your video, when you air quoted, we can't see anything, or at least
I know. I turned it off for bandwidth reasons.
So the first question that you come to when you're having this conversation is, why are we doing it? What is the guiding principle to using a hybrid solution? So there's a couple of key obvious answers on here. Regulatory compliance. You have data that isn't allowed to be in the cloud, for example. Now that is, I think, an argument that 5 years ago was a very strong argument, and nowadays I think there are still cases where that's the case, or where that may happen. But I think they are fewer and fewer. And as being someone who supports the public sector, the U.S. government specifically, it is something that I hear less and less. For example, Microsoft is Amazon has, and Microsoft is standing up a secret environment right now for classified information. So more and more we're seeing that particular reason to do a hybrid environment go away. You also have user adoption and mobility, sharing capabilities, these features that are coming out at a very rapid pace for Office 365 that are very slow to come to SharePoint. So let's say you have a regulatory concern, but you also want to enable mobility, or you want to support, I'm going to skip a bullet there, support customizations or third-party apps that are not yet available online. These are all pretty standard reasons, Craig, that you might see a hybrid environment. What other things do you think are
so
reasons
the
you
hybrid,
might see that?
yeah, so one reason for the hybrid environment, as far as what you're talking about, adoption and sharing and stuff, as you mentioned, right, Microsoft, you don't hear it as much anymore, or this phrase, but a cloud first mentality. So new features, new things come out to the cloud first, then they get rolled to the on-premises. We're trying, we only roll out the on-premises versions like every 3 years, so it does take some time, and there's a lot of parity there with patches and things like that. The other thing is, as you talked about, third-party apps and customizations. Organizations have built their customizations. There's some stuff you can't do on the cloud because you can't get to the underlying server. So if you have full solutions, full trust solutions built in your on-premises, those are hard to get away from. You talk about compliance earlier, but you might have regulatory policies and procedures that you've taken years to build out, and things like e-discovery and ways that you do things and find data that's just hard to move at one time, right? And then the other thing is, you might be deciding to go, and again, legacy processes. So that's talking about legacy processes, but you might decide to you're going to Office 365, but just the sheer volume of data and things like that, it's just difficult to move, right? So it's kind of that stepping stone approach. You might be in hybrid for a while you're trying to get there.
Yeah, and so Haral made a comment in the chat there that's very relevant. Again, we're talking about hybrid, not just having SharePoint on-prem versus SharePoint in the cloud. I'm talking to a Department of Defense customer right now about standing up SharePoint 2019 in Azure while they perform their migration to Office 365 to SharePoint Online. They're not talking about hybrid. They're just talking about two environments to support their needs. Haral's absolutely right. You may need a hybrid search across those environments, and that's the time where you take that step from having two distinct environments to connecting them. So thank you for pointing that out. So as we talk through, as if you've decided that you do need to move into a hybrid environment, let's talk through a little bit about what that's going to look like.
Sure. So this is just an overall high-level hybrid architecture example. As Jay kind of alluded to and Haral's mentioned, there's different reasons why you might want to do that, and there are different ways that you can set up a hybrid architecture. We'll go more on that in a little while when we get towards the end of this, actually. But one of the things that we wanted to represent, make sure that you knew, again, there's two farms, right? So our user is going to be on premises, right? So he's going to be behind our firewall in all practical purposes. He's going to be in our building. So he's accessing services on our building. Since COVID, that might not be true. The user may be outside of the building, and then in which case accessing our network through, a virtual means, right? Virtual machine might be tunneling in or something to that effect. But anyways, they want to get to the on-premise SharePoint server. So we got to have Active Directory authenticate them, authorize them to be in there, and let them hook into the SharePoint and then hook into the server. Else, if we're running Office 365, they need to go to Office 365 and then be authenticated through Azure Active Directory. And in this example here, we're talking about we've got the SharePoint server hooked into Azure Active Directory with the directory sync tool, so we can make sure that we know what their credentials are. So that can go both ways and pass information. And then we have the features that are the hybrid features that we're allowed to use in Office 365. So, that's the search. That could be search, that could be profiles, that could be sites, that could be taxonomy, whatever. We have a way of connecting back and forth between the two servers. So this is a high-level example of how you would do it. So you just need to keep in mind that you basically have two distinct sets of areas that we got to set up some kind of connection and go through that firewall to get to.
So as you're going through, the question becomes, so what hybrid features are we going to be looking at? So Haral, you brought it up, hybrid search. So the first option, there are actually two types of search. The first one is actually terrible for the user experience. Hybrid federated search, this is where you have two search indexes. And when you do a search result, you get two different search results. So you've got your SharePoint Online results and you've got your SharePoint Server results. The nice thing is, in an environment where you have to keep that information segregated, you have to keep your highly sensitive data on premises, and you don't want it indexed by the cloud with that index information in the cloud. This is an example of where you would, or how you would handle that. Again, from a user experience perspective, it's pretty terrible. Frankly, I remember the first time they rolled this out to my consulting firm a handful of years back, like everybody was pissed because it just becomes very difficult to find what you're looking for. It's a good attempt to bring things together, but it kind of misses the mark. On the other hand, there's cloud hybrid search, which brings it all together.
Yeah, so cloud hybrid search, right? That's where we have so that's where we're using the hybrid model, right? We're connecting in the back end and we're doing all that good stuff. But basically, we're putting our indexing agent is going to live in Office 365. So it will actually crawl the content in SharePoint server and store the index there. And then our users can search from either place. It goes to the one indexing server that lives in Office 365. And then we can, in our search results, we can put that information together. So as Jay said, our users don't really care, right, where the content lives. So that's what they want to be able to do is have one place to search, one place to have the search results. And the nice thing about SharePoint is it doesn't matter if it's on premises or if it's online. If you can get at it with a browser, right, it's going to display the same. So that's the huge benefit for that, right? We can have interconnectivity between the two servers. We have the indexing, and our users have this unified experience where they can do their searching all in one place, and it's served right there. And we have happier users that way.
Yeah. So this is, when you talk about hybrid, from an end user perspective, this is really what your users are looking for is the ability to find everything all together. But I mean, as you see, the risk you run is that data, the index is going to be in the cloud.
Yeah, one last thing to add on that. If you're running an older farm like 2013, right, that's where if you're doing the other way that we were talking about, the federated search, right, you can worry about the index server getting full or getting big or having to have space for that. So one nice thing about this is we don't have to worry about any sizing limit on our index server because it'll scale out to meet whatever your index needs are.
Cool. So the next piece that you're going to think about is what's going on with my profiles. Hybrid profiles, they ensure a sole source of truth in M365. This gives you that ability to make sure when your users are looking up information, they're looking up one set of data. You don't have to worry about having two different sets of phone numbers and addresses and trying to keep all that up to date. One of the things that's worth keeping in mind is if your SharePoint on-premises profiles have a lot of custom values, you're going to have to use the bulk update API to bring that into Active Directory or Azure Active Directory. But once you've done that, there's a timer job that then keeps it up to date on a regular basis. So there's work to keep all of that together. You just have to keep in mind when you're trying to synchronize between your farm on premises and in the cloud, there's going to be a delay between when something is updated in one location and when the primary index gets that information. The other piece of that worth knowing is if your organization chooses not to have Delve turned on, as many have done over the last half dozen years or so, and hopefully I didn't say a number too old, then your information is going to go in the M365 profile. So there is still somewhere for that information to get stored. The other piece that I want to talk about here, it's the followed sites capability. So the way it works is you have followed sites in SharePoint on premises and followed sites in SharePoint online. But if you turn on the hybrid sync for that, all of that information will get pulled into Office 365 and it will synchronize. So when you go to Office 365, it will have synchronized the list of SharePoint on premises sites that you follow, and you'll be able to access that list from one location. Craig, anything you wanted to add about hybrid profiles and directory?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, so the profile is just nice because, again, people like to have one-click access to things. So even if you're on premises and you click on the profile from on premises, it will redirect behind the scenes, right? It's a link to the Office 365 profile so that it makes it easier for them. They get the same information no matter where they click on it. Yeah, so just, again, making that more, that user experience seem like it's all one system is the big key to this.
Thanks, I needed a refill on my coffee. The next feature we want to talk about is business applications. So there are two methods here. The first one is business connectivity services. The nice thing about business connectivity services is this works all the way back to SharePoint 2013. And this enables your organization to connect to legacy solutions. It allows you to connect to SQL Server and bring that data into SharePoint Online. So again, the thing you need to consider is whether or not, and you'll see this in both of these bullets, whether or not the data you're sharing should be shared online. But if it is, then you can use the BCS to pull that in. Your other option is Power Apps and the Power Platform. With SharePoint 2019, there is connectivity to Power Apps and Power Platform. There's a SharePoint on-premises connector, which you can use to bring SharePoint lists from your on-prem farm into the Power Platform. So if you've got a workflow, anything on a business app that you need to pull something from one of those lists, you can certainly do that this way. And then the next topic is regarding information architecture and information management. This one goes a little bit all over the place, so forgive me as I jump around there. The first thing I'm going to comment on is actually the second bullet, hierarchies and subsites. This is not a hybrid issue. And in fact, if you come back at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock my time, I think it's 4 o'clock in California, you'll hear me talk about information architecture with SharePoint Online with modern collaboration solutions. And one of the things you're going to hear us talk about is if you go too many levels deep, search does not work as well. So if you have more than 3 levels of sites and subsites, you're going to find that the content 4, 5, 17 levels down does not get the same prioritization as the stuff in the root level site. So if you think about it from a hybrid perspective, then you have to realize that you're already potentially making it harder for users to access content between their on-prem and online farms. If you're using a deep architecture, you're making it even harder by making search less effective.
Nice.
With regard to how you navigate between these things, you need to have a consideration, a plan for how you want users to navigate. Both the on-premises and online capabilities have navigational capabilities, so keep an eye on how you navigate and what you want to design for that. Also, there's a hybrid app launcher, which enables you to access the online tools from your on-premises farm. So it gives you connectivity or a link between the different capabilities so you can access the full breadth of Office 365. The last piece there on this page is the what data goes where and the self-service creation. I thought this was pretty helpful. Especially 2016, 2019 SharePoint Online, they're all designed for end users to be able to create what they need when they need. And certainly it can be locked down, and you can either buy third-party tools like AvePoint's governance, or you can use Power Platform to build a provisioning system. But it's important to note there is a hybrid self-service creation capability, which lets you push users to SharePoint on premises when that's the appropriate option.
Cool.
And then, Craig, I skipped over. Do you want to talk about content types and taxonomies?
Yeah, so the nice thing about the hybrid taxonomy and content types is that allows us to have a shared taxonomy, a shared taxonomy instead of content types. So, using the term store and the content types that we might have for a site for both, right? So we can share information on that and do a migration. We'll have to use some PowerShell to kind of sync that up. But once we have it all hooked up and working, our users should be able to add their content into both places. So any kind of managed metadata terms or content types that they create, there are timer jobs on the back end that should run and update those periodically. So it might not be in an instant update, but we can have the same IDs, same developers can code against it. We should be able to pull those in. So again, if you added something to like a SharePoint Online site or an on-premises site, it may take a few minutes for that to go. Could take longer depending on when the job runs, but eventually they will get synced up. And again, we're just that overall, better user experience. We don't want to have to do double entries for taxonomy. We don't want to have to worry about where we are when we're creating those kind of things.
I think this one's you, Craig.
Inbound connectivity. So part of being hybrid, right, is we're going to have to connect from our on-premises to Office 365. So if we want to get things to connect, right, we have to set up that connection. So by default, there's an STS certificate that we'll have to configure. When we do that, well, it's actually configured for us, I should say, but sometimes we might want to use our own publicly signed certificate. So if we do that, we'll have to replace that. Included in the slide is a way to do that. So if you're looking at the slide notes, there'll be a link to the instructions to do that, a little bit more than outside the scope of what we can cover here in the time allotted, right? Also, for your inbound connectivity, you need a reverse proxy device to make sure that we have a secure endpoint. So we want to make sure that we're able to connect and use an SSL certificate so that we can have a secure traffic that's coming in. And then also we're probably going to have a publicly registered internet domain so that we can have external access, or if that's something that we want, we need to have that. And obviously when you do that, you need to have the ability to create and edit the DNS record so you can do the proper configuration of that so that everything works correctly. And again, for inbound connectivity, the things that we're going to be looking at, mentioned before, right? We want to have the inbound hybrid search. We want to have connectivity, business connectivity searches. We want to be able to do those type of things, right? So again, make sure we have the proper certificate, instructions for that. Make sure you have the reverse proxy server. and that your domain is set up and hooked in with the DNS is configured correctly.
To go back a couple of slides real quick, Haral, you asked, I think you're asking if the hybrid profile sits inside of the SharePoint Online profile database. So Craig, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, because this is a little bit deeper than I normally go, but the profile data for a hybrid profile does sit in Microsoft 365. Is that, Haral, if that's not what you were asking, please go ahead and ask get a little more clear in the comments there. Craig, does that sound like what was that the right answer? Let me ask it that way.
I believe so. So
Okay.
we may have to double check on that, but yeah, it should all reside there once you sync them up. Then
right.
Going forward, it maintains it.
All right, perfect. And then Teresa, you were asking if classic versus modern affects search. So I know there are a classic and modern search experience, and they are very different. The modern taking classic versus modern hierarchy. So Craig, do you have an idea on this? Other than too many. No, I think we're talking about some.
I'm thinking, sorry.
No problem. So we're talking about so there's the depth of your hierarchy, and then there's how you're organizing your information architecture. If you're talking about classic versus modern sites, I don't think that the view changes.
Matters.
Yeah, I don't think that changes anything. There's the search experience that changes things, and then there's the hierarchy. But I would have to do some research to double check on whether or not modern view versus classic view site types affects the search results. And thank you for asking. Sorry, I haven't dug into that very much, so that's a good one to learn.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Sorry.
So the next part is on auditing and reporting, and this one kind of made me pull my hair out while I was researching it. And so if there's anybody in the crowd that has answers on this, I would love to hear it. And what it comes down to is, from a native perspective, there really isn't anything that brings it together. There are on-premises, of course, you've got your health analyzer, your reporting in central admin, your audit logs, your dashboard, but it's focused on the on-premises capabilities. And it's, so all that reporting that you're probably used to for years and years, it's just what's happening within SharePoint on-prem there.
Yeah, so with that, also SharePoint Online has its own set of tools, right? So, and its own set. So a lot of the auditing and reporting around that is going to be specific to SharePoint Online. So we're going to be in the Office 365 Admin Center looking at service health, message center, usage reports, those kind of things, to see what kind of information we can get from there. We're going to be in the Security and Compliance Center looking at the audit logs, setting up alerts, looking at reporting features there. And that actually, there could be a lot of stuff that we're looking in there, not only in terms of that, but, setting up retention rules, data loss prevention rules, sensitive information rules, sensitivity labels, and those kind of things. So there's a lot in the Security and Compliance Center that would apply to specifically SharePoint Online that we can take advantage of and use. And then, we're also in Azure Active Directory, so we'd be looking at audit logs, and doing access reviews and things through that center. There's a bunch of stuff that we could get into as far as with site creation and enforcing things like conditional access and those kind of things. But a lot of that is going to happen in the SharePoint Online Administration and Microsoft Online Administration centers, but it really doesn't have a way of looking into what's happening on-premises. Right. There was a bit. Jay, you want to talk to this one?
I was really excited when I found this. So I found the hybrid auditing capability. I found a couple articles that mentioned it, started researching it, and Craig pointed out, yes, we did have that. It was in public preview in for SharePoint 2016. And then Microsoft decided not to go forward with it. So again, you've got your on-premises capabilities, you've got your online capabilities, and unless you go to a third party like DocAv Report Center, your ability to monitor across both of them is pretty limited. So we talked a lot about the tech. Maybe not enough. I imagine for those of you who are looking at hybrid, you've got a lot more questions, and I would frankly love to continue that conversation. But I also want to point out some of the other sides. I mentioned I run a podcast called Buzzkill. This is what the Buzzkill podcast is all about. It's all about, hey, great, we've got a great concept on tech. What do we need to do to support that? So if you are doing hybrid, the first bullet I want to focus on is how much you need to plan from a technical experience, understanding the architecture, understanding the features and how those features work. From a business perspective and change management, making sure users understand that, hey, this feature in SharePoint Online works differently than this feature in SharePoint on premises. Provisioning is going to be different, or lifecycle management might be different. So you have to have a plan around understanding what those differences are and communicating what those differences are. You want to work with your users so they get what they're doing and why they're doing it. You also want to look at your platform best practices. Oh, my mouse is all over the place. You want to look at your platform best practices. Something that may be a best practice in 2013 or 2016 may not be the same in SharePoint Online. And so you want to look at those to determine, how are we going to use DLP? How are we going to use access reviews or retention to make sure that, again, you've got an understanding of what it looks like and where it goes.
Yeah, and so to go along with that, right? It's not only are they different in Office 365, but they're different depending on what license you have. So you used to be able to buy the licenses or the CALs or whatever we were calling them in the time for 2013, 2016, 2017, 2019, but it applied to the entire server, right? You bought the server and whoever used it, they used it and they were able to do everything. And SharePoint Online, that's not always the case, or it might be the case for how they use SharePoint Online. But if you have an E3 license or you're in a government tenant or an E5 license, it might work differently on the back end when we're talking about measuring and auditing and doing processes, right? So data loss prevention works differently. E-discovery might work differently if you're having an E5 license, which is our highest enterprise license, like some of the compliance features, some of the things you might want to look at. So the site itself is going to act very similar, but as Jason kind of said, with government, you don't always have the features there either. So there's a lot of feature parity. So those are things you're going to have to look at and say, what do I get with my specific users in this specific tenant with this specific licensing, and try to have good end user communication, good end user documentation. We want to automate processes as best we can. That might be site collection or site creation processes and things. We want to make sure we have our measuring and auditing down, where we're going to do it, what kind of reports. When we're talking about that, I like to talk about lifecycle management a little bit, and what do we do to limit, it's not necessarily hybrid stuff, but how do we limit site sprawl and how do we control that kind of thing? And then the big thing is, this is not when we're talking about governance, right? This is not a one and done. We're always going to create it. We're always going to be working on it. We're going to try to figure out better ways that we can improve. So the whole thing is, a constant improvement on what we're doing. And especially in Office 365 or SharePoint Online, Microsoft, my company, not that I own it, but is always rolling out new features, right? So how do we keep abreast of all that kind of thing? So there's that, because once you think you got it all nailed down, right, we're going to change something to make your life just a little bit miserable, because we don't want anybody to get complacent.
Yeah. And Craig, you talked about the constant improvement and things changing over time. That second bullet, understand your business, is huge, because if the reason you're doing this it changes, if the driver behind why you're continuing to do hybrid changes, you're going to have to change the infrastructure. You know, it may be, again, that DoD customer I was talking about, their primary use case is they need to move a lot of content in a very short period of time and get off their hardware. And when they do, there's going to be third-party and fully custom tools that built into their SharePoint farms that need a home. So those will go into SharePoint and Azure until they're developed off. Well, once they're done, you know, we need a plan for checking. Do we still need this hybrid? Do we still need this on-premises farm to support these workloads, et cetera? So that the concept of understanding your business and understanding why you're doing this is really a huge part of this.
Cool.
Now, if you are still following along, if you're still interested, Craig, you shared this content with me. I think this is really great. Microsoft has roadmaps for each of these capabilities that you might be interested. OneDrive, different site features, search, so on and so forth. The deployment roadmaps have step-by-step guides on exactly how to deploy this stuff.
Yes. So I wanted to have this slide entitled, wait, there's more, because I wanted to be infomercial-like, but Jay forgot to do it.
Sorry.
No, I was just kidding. So yeah, obviously more information than we can possibly go through to go through the step-by-step instructions, the PowerShell commandlets that you will need to do this, the whole servers, all the certificate information, the server information, all that kind of good stuff that you really need to perform the integrations and the hybrid configurations. So depending on what you want to do, like if you just want to do sites, or if you want to do OneDrive, or if you want to just do hybrid search, right? You can click on these roadmaps. And again, Jay is going to put this out on Twitter. We're going to give it to we're going to give it to the organization, the conference. They're going to be able to distribute this. This is all being recorded. But these are full clickable links and addresses that you can go to get all this information and the step-by-step instructions on what to do. And throughout the whole presentation, we put in pretty detailed notes on what we discussed with links to a lot of things. So you may want to make sure you just grab the presentation because of that as well. Wanted to make sure that, you know, not only do you have the information in these high level slides, but that the meat of what we're talking about and the links to the information is available in the notes of the slide. Because I always hate that when I go to a conference, right, and I watch a presentation and it's just full of pretty pictures, but I can't remember what the person said or whatever. So yeah, that's it. Step-by-step instructions, click on, follow along, and it will guide you through it. And if you need any help, you can usually reach out to your Microsoft rep to kind of help you get connected with somebody that can do that, or a third-party affiliate like AvePoint or something to that effect,
Sure.
Or other organizations.
So
gotta love those third-party affiliates.
So with this,
and that's really the end of our presentation.
If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, or if you raise your hand, I think we can unmute you. I can't remember if that works here.
No, we
Nope.
can't. Jay, we're not doing that. So
Not my doing.
Enjoyed the
Talk to
show.
Craig.
Thank you for coming. I hope you got some information out of that. And nothing else. Have a nice day. Jay's going to be hanging around for the next episode, Why Your Earth is Flat. Or
Why your Earth is flat. That's kind of it. Yep. It's not that far off. Here we go. The architecture is flat.